St. John's Passion lurches from one devastating scene to another. The peaceful garden, the place of prayer, is suddenly plunged into terror and confusion. The courts and cells with their blood-soaked stones, the smell of fear. The humiliating walk of the condemned past the crowd, by turns fascinated, hostile, amused, heartbroken, horrified. Mary standing near the cross, giving her son the only thing that she can now give, modeling to the very end strength, courage, dignity. And then the sun sinking over this bleak landscape of death, patrolled by hostile executioners, draped with mutilated corpses, hung like scarecrows on their gibbets. Now, the friends of Jesus venture out of the shadows. His body is gently received into loving arms and sadly borne away. He is cleansed, anointed, wrapped in clean linen, and perfume and spices fill the air and the senses as he's carried to the garden tomb. This is a scene that every one of us who dares to love has to play. A journey that begins with the first traumatic separation of birth, that goes on and on until the grave. We can't walk our babies through life. We can't accompany them to school to protect them from criticism, punishment, bullies. We can't accompany them as they begin to fall in love and break their hearts and discover pain, disappointment, and loss. We can't fight their battles with depression or addiction or illness. We can't accompany the people we love to work and defend them against unfairness and prejudice. We can't advance their promotions, increase their salaries, criticize their bosses for their selfishness, their lack of consideration. We can't stop anyone's dreams from being slowly, irrevocably eroded. We can't walk our aging parents through every appointment, every encounter with the larger world to ensure that they're treated with respect and dignity, that they're not exploited or ignored. Loving someone sounds like such an active, positive, joy-filled thing, but so much of it seems to demand standing in the shadows and waiting to receive back the body that has been beaten and bloodied by the world, to gently enfold it with arms of love, to soothe with gentle words, to dry tears, to bind up wounds, cleansing, perfuming, carrying into the garden. Every time we recall the Last Supper, we're reminded that Jesus' body was broken before it was given. The slow, silent, visible breaking of bread so that we may be fed. We recognize in this symbolic action not only the action and the identity of Jesus, but the pattern for our own lives and mission. We know that every one of us will be broken through suffering, and that no matter how much we try to protect and shield those whom we love, they too will suffer. Since the loss of Eden, that has been the lot of every one of our race. But because this new Adam has redeemed what was lost by the first, that broken bread is our reminder and pledge that this difficult discipline of waiting at home for the world to do its worst to those we love, to be broken ourselves through their suffering, let alone our own, and then still to come out of the shadows, even with our own wounds, to receive and hold, to soothe and comfort and cleanse and anoint and heal all that the world has inflicted on our dear ones. This is a holy task. This is what we have done in every age, this Holy Communion. Our brothers and sisters, our parents and our children, all of our dearest ones need us to do that. Our world needs us to do that. With its addiction to violence and the naming and destruction of victims, well, not one of us will survive. What we listen to today is, of course, only part of the story. Why else would we tell it? And how else could we bear to have it repeated? We know that this is the Passover of the Lord, in which we prayerfully, attentively recall what we know to be our own deepest truth, that our God chose to be with us and can still be found at table and in the company of friends, that our God suffered and labored and endured until death, so that there's no extreme of pain to which we or those we love can find ourselves where our God has not already been and where that God may still be encountered. That our God once lay still and cold and abandoned in a grave, in the depths of an abandonment that each one of us has, at least in part, tasted and known. And that in time God's irrepressible vivaciousness and joy could not be capped or contained, that God's truth and God's assurances could not be extinguished. And all this was not merely a one-off historical event, but for those of us who believe, it is the pattern and the promise of our own existence. And because we abide in that knowledge, for those we love and even for those we have never and will never meet, you and I are the peace that lies beyond the anguish, the reassurance beyond the doubt, the forgiveness and acceptance beyond the trial. It's said that to believe in miracles, you first have to be able to receive gifts freely bestowed, altogether unmerited. That's why we always experience the birth of our babies as miracle, sheer, unmerited, undeserved grace. And you and I are engaged in this holy work of making miracles believable, the miracle of resurrection made credible by our own acts of forgiveness, our gestures of love, our words of forgiveness. Isn't that what it means to live in the communion of saints? To repeat this action time and time again, to have our hearts broken through love and to keep on loving, and to keep on making room in our hearts for all of God's broken ones, to recognize in the battered bodies of our brothers and sisters throughout the world victims of war, victims of nature, victims of poverty and injustice and exploitation, the broken body of our Christ, to allow love to draw us out of the shadows of our own fear and uncertainty and become ourselves bread broken for the world's hunger. This is a story anticipated, understood, even accepted, a story of fidelity and sacrifice, of inexhaustible integrity and tenderness, where love triumphs over everything that could be hurled against it, so that even death is revealed as merely a distraction in the inexhaustible, unquenchable life of God. And so, bearing in mind the chapters that surround these, before and after, we acknowledge that for now, this is where and how our God chooses to be revealed. This is where God is to be found, just as our God may be found in every stage of our own journey, wherever we stand between table and empty tomb. So may it be.